Well, we made it to the last week of the Pennsylvania Crossbow season. I'm all out of doe tags. For me, the rest of the year here in Pennsylvania is buck only. I'm going to use decoys, I'm going to pull out all the stops, and we got to make it count. Okay, well, a quick update on the Pennsylvania Crossbow season, the last week of the Pennsylvania Crossbow season. Today is the Friday of the last week. I've only got today and tomorrow to make it happen if I'm going to get a buck during the crossbow season, that is. Today I'm sitting over the Buckfield food plot in the Buckfield blind with the decoy out there, but I took off the antlers today to mix it up a little bit. I've got it dressed up as a doe instead. My daughter tells me that when the antlers are off, it is known as Doley instead of Buckley. Yesterday, I got here bright and early, looking down across the food plot. There were already deer in this food plot. This Buckfield food plot's actually within view of the house. It's right below the house. And I always, before I put my scent-free clothes on outside on the side porch there, I look down here to see if there's anything. I don't want to spook any deer out of this food plot because they're real wary of the house. And I looked down here, and there was a few deer down here. There were a few eating the food plot, and then a smaller buck, made his way across here and was, I guess, harassing the does or looking for does or whatever. Made his way across here, so I had to hold off a little bit before I came down until they cleared out the food plot. And then I made my way down here, and the funny thing was the decoy was here in this blind the whole time, and the deer were right outside the blind eating. So I unzipped it, pulled the decoy out, wrestled with that for a few minutes, went over there, and I set it up in the woods in front of what I call the ridge stand. I set it up there, nice little spot for it, and waited a little while, and then I did some grunting, some calling, and I did call in a nice little buck, but he managed to come down through, and he was really looking over that decoy. He made his way down, he was looking at that decoy, giving it a good look, and he was a little bit scared off, and he ended up running down the hill like full pace, man. He took off full throttle, going off ran on down through. The problem with that decoy is apparently, I bought the smallest antlered decoy I could because I didn't want to scare deer off. And sure enough, I find a buck to come in with antlers smaller than this. Like this is too big for him. So yesterday was kind of a bust for that reason. Today what I did, there were no deer here when I got here, but I came down here and set up in this food plot anyway, and it had snowed last night, so there's a nice fresh coat of snow, and looking out here you could see very easily that the deer had been in here since it snowed, so they had been in here overnight. Usually when I see deer activity early in the morning, it means that they're going to be done once the sun comes up. And sure enough, I sat here all morning and didn't have any activity at all. Yeah, we'll play by ear. See what happens. Tonight I'm going to go down to the well pad blind set up down there. Haven't decided if I'm taking a decoy with me or not, but I'm going to pack up that decoy now and head back to the house. It was clear a lot of the morning here and finally warmed up. I mean, it was 28 when I got all dressed and came down here. 28 degrees. It's warmed up, then it started to thaw, and then we got to listen to all the stuff falling off the branches behind you where it sounds like there's a herd of deer coming toward you. So I had to sit and listen to that, of course, and everything's melting and dripping everywhere. But that's okay. Keep your fingers crossed. We'll see what happens this evening. I'm going to set up down there in that well pad blind, and we'll go from there. Well, this is the point in the season when things started to fall apart. I did go back to the well pad food plot that night, but things were crazy that night, as you'll see here, and the next morning wasn't much better. Well, today is the last day of the Pennsylvania crossbow season. I've got what's left of Buckley set up out there in the well pad food plot. So last night I come in, set up here a couple hours before dark, and I was hoping history would repeat itself. I set the decoy up, looking down across the food plot, and I was waiting for deer to come in on the bottom end there. Maybe the does would come in and a buck would come in with them like happened before. And as we get later in the season, I'm, I'll take another look at that buck. If I got another broadside shot at him, an opportunity, I might shoot him this time. I don't know. It's funny how you change your mind as the season gets later and as it gets colder. Those are the two things that seem to affect my decision making. Sure enough, about an hour before dark, I see a doe look into the food plot, and then another one, and eventually 3 does made their way into the food plot. I watched them until the legal shooting hours, and they made their way up through here. They're cautious of that decoy, but didn't seem to bother them too much. Eventually, it got dark enough that the camera light was just about out. I had my ISO cranked up to 12,800, which is so high that you have to get special permission from the camera to crank it up that high. But I did that, and I had the aperture wide open. I was shooting as wide as possible, and I had the frame rate. I even turned the frame rate down at one point, down to 30, which is going to slow down and let more light in and let more light on that sensor. Terrible picture quality, but it was the most light that I could get to the camera. And at the legal shooting hours, you're just about out of light. Like, it was pretty much unusable video. This camera is actually better than a lot of cameras on the market. GoPro got footage of the sky, but couldn't make out anything on the ground. Well, I'm going to do a video down the road of low light shooting too, so make sure you subscribe because you might find that stuff interesting. We'll see what we can do to improve our low light shooting. Nevertheless, I could tell the does were still here, even though I really couldn't make them out as it got darker. And about 5:20 or so, I looked down there, and there's a few more deer down at the bottom end of the food plot. And I thought, well, maybe, I don't dare shut off the camera because these DSLRs, when you shut them off, they click. The shutter physically closes, and that sound, the deer, like, what's that sound? What's that little click? And they were right in front of me here. They were at 20 yards in front of me, feeding right in the middle of this food plot. And all of a sudden, about 5:25 or so, just before 5:30, I see a deer moving up through here. And I lift up the scope, and I put up the scope on him. And I could tell it's a buck because I can see these massive horns, massive antlers compared to what I've seen all season, that's for sure. And he's making his way up through here, and he just walked. And I just saw him for a brief second, but he was going toward my decoy. The decoy was up here. Hit that decoy head on. Made a heck of a noise because it's a big plastic decoy. It's like hitting a 55-gallon drum with a hammer. And all the deer ran out, and it emptied out the food plot. So he kind of did me a favor, but he tore old Buckley up pretty good. Well, old Buckley has seen better days. Parts of him all over the place. Poor Buckley. This morning when I got up, I looked out the back window. It was free and clear. There's nothing in the field, nothing in the food plot. So I went on the side porch, put my clothes on, got all finished dressing, put my boots on. I must have made enough of a racket on that side porch that that I spooked the deer that were down there, and they got up and ran out. One of them was that nice buck. And apparently they were bedded down in the field right below the house. It's the last day of the season. What I like to do on a day like that, I walk around to shoot some miscellaneous video and take a look at where the deer sign is, and it's a relaxing day for me. I'm not going to get bent out of shape about hunting, but take some pictures, enjoy the day. It's a very nice day to be out walking around the woods. And then I'm going to come down here and I'm going to give it one more time sitting on this well-pad food plot, and see if somebody shows up again during shooting hours, and maybe we'll get a shot. We'll see. I went for my traditional walk. What I try to do last few years, what I've done on the last day of the season is I go for a walk, sort of check out the area, walk around, see if there's any change in the deer sign that I wouldn't have picked up on earlier. I did find an oak leaf, which surprised me. I've lived here all my life and was not aware that there were any oak trees in the area. So it was neat to see that. I've got to keep an eye on that. It's down in a creek. It's down a real thick area where I wouldn't have seen it because you just don't walk through there. But it's right in front of, actually it's not too far from the worst tree stand ever that I have set up down there. So I'll have to keep an eye on it. Maybe it'll turn into something down the road. One way to find out. While I was down there at the worst tree stand ever, I pulled the camera. It's been sitting down there for a while. Threw the card in the camera here, and the only thing I saw in there was a nice little buck and a raccoon, a fox, and a bear, if you can believe that, at dark, of course. That's what the last day of the crossbow season is for me, as a chance to just sort of, the pressure's off. I know what deer are out there. I know what kind of luck I had. I've already got a couple deer down. And now I get to sort of just enjoy the place a little bit, walk around, have a good time. And so I'm just going to sit here real quick, catch my breath. I'm down below the Buckfield food plot, and I'm just going to sit here and enjoy the view, looking out over this little swamp here, this little marsh. I am going to finish out the day over at the well-pad food plot. We'll see what happens. Well, I did go back to set up in that well-pad food plot that night and finish out the crossbow season. I didn't set up a decoy this time, hoping that I wouldn't spook some deer that way, and sure enough, my plan worked because they came out earlier and they came out right in front of me. Now, like I said, I'm all out of doe tags, but for me, this is a perfect way to end the season. Just the way the season started. Me sitting in a blind over one of my food plots, watching some does and getting some good video. Now, don't think for a minute that that's the end of Death by Bunjie for this season. It's not. We've still got the rifle season coming up. We've got the late season, and I still have a buck tag along with a couple of other surprises. So make sure that you subscribe to Death by Bunjie. Make sure that you tune in and keep checking back, and you'll see some more great crossbow action here on Death by Bunjie.